in the field of textiles we have today. So it's good for food, it's good for medicine, it's good for clothing, and oh yeah, it was the source of fuel for all of the ancient world. Not only was it fuel, but about 100 AD, 108 AD, a man working in the Chinese court found that if you mixed mulberry pulp with cannabis, you got this little slurry that made a lattice type framework inside the structure that later became paper. It was actually the mainstay of paper. It was what everything pretty much has been written on except for Egyptian papyrus scrolls. Cannabis has been the mainstay of human knowledge. In fact, without cannabis, we wouldn't have anything from, you know, any of the Greeks. We wouldn't have anything from, oh, Archimedes. He's the man. God, we lost a lot with Archimedes. In fact, Archimedes getting killed was one of those things that didn't recover until about the 1600s, but that's a whole nother story. Now, when you look at cannabis, you got food, you got clothing, you got medicine, and you got fuel. Wow. For 12,000 years, we were getting the source of food, clothing, medicine, and fuel from the surface of the earth. And then, a few guys got together and decided to cheat at Monopoly. Now, this is a funny story, and you're gonna love it. It's a bit tragic, but it's got a happy ending, I'm sure. So, there was this guy. He was actually a descendant from the DuPont family. Let me start with the DuPonts. They were the ones that helped give Napoleon gunpowder. Now, they gave Napoleon gunpowder. Oh, they've also brought humanity such brilliant things as the widespread production of dynamite and explosives. And that's, hey, you're a chemical corporation, that's great, that's great. Well, Pierre DuPont in the early 1900s, well, after they actually fled the French Revolution when they had to run for their lives, they came over to America. In the early 1900s, Pierre DuPont bought the controlling share of General Motors Corporation. Now, when he did this, he might have had some ulterior motives, and I'm going to go into that. But, well, ulterior motives is this. Did you guys know there's no such thing as biodiesel? No such thing. No such thing as biodiesel. That's a misnomenclature. It's a total, it's a fraud, it's a fabrication, because Rudolf Diesel designed the diesel engine to run on hemp oil. Oh yes, it ran on hemp oil for about 30 years, till this guy named Pierre DuPont bought the controlling share of General Motors and switched tractors and cars and everything that was big trucks that were being produced at the time to run from this bio-based fuel to this dangerous byproduct of all his petrometalling. And when I say that, I mean this. They were doing a lot of stuff. They were having fun with the hydrocarbons, mixing everything around. Hey everybody, look what I made this time, look what I made. And the whole while, they got a few good things out of it, and then they got just lakes of gas. And they looked around, they said, what the hell are we gonna do with all this? We can't dump it anywhere. If we dump it somewhere, people are gonna get wise. I mean, somebody's smoking out by it, starts up in a lake of fire, and then the jig is up. You know, it's like, okay, I've got an idea. Let's tweak this little engine around just a bit, and rather than having it run on gasoline that is coming from the earth, we could have it rely on that gasoline that we're making, that stuff that we're getting from deep, deep down, where no one else can get to. What else did Pierre DuPont do? Oh, in 1931 he stabilized gun cotton and made a little fabric called nylon. Only problem was, nylon had to compete against the first and most cultivated plant that made the best fabric known to humankind, hemp. And so, Mr. DuPont, and with the help of some of his family, a man actually named Lumont DuPont, who was had a little nephew named Henry J. Anslinger. Now, this is where the story gets funny, because Henry J. Anslinger was the man that was appointed to the Federal Narcotics Board. And when he was appointed to this, for about 10 years, Mr. Henry J. Anslinger, with the help of a dude named William Randolph Hearst, got together and devised a plan. And the plan was this. Hearst had major investments in Oregon, Washington timber bought vast stretches of timberland and was very mad at Pancho Villa. That's something completely, it's part of the story, but I'll tell it later. He bought vast stretches of timberland. The only problem, that timberland wasn't worth much as timber. I mean, you're going to develop out there, you're going to build houses, you got to cut all that stuff down. What are you going to do with the trees? Because they weren't making paper from trees then, they were making paper from hemp. There were hemp mills producing paper all over the United States. And so Mr. Anslinger and Mr. Hearst devised a plan to trick the entire world into believing the first and most cultivated plant in human history is evil. And I know it sounds like the plot of like an Austin Powers movie, something that Dr. Evil would do. It really does sound like the plot of an Austin Powers movie, because these two men went on a campaign of total ignorance. Basically, they took something that everybody knew, cannabis, hemp. It had been known in the medical profession for quite literally thousands and thousands of years, and they sought to rebrand it. Now, here's my problem. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word is God. And so when you take a word that everybody knows, hemp or cannabis, and everybody did know it, even the doctors, everybody of the day, and you say, there's this new dangerous drug called marijuana, and it's making the Mexicans rape all of the white children. It will make the Negro man, I don't know why I used the Mexican voice for the Negro man, but it'll make the Negro man step on a white man's shadow. It'll make the Negro man look at a white man twice. In fact, one of their big propaganda things was the fact that Mexicans were so lazy. They said, Mexicans are so lazy, we need this marijuana that's making them lazy. We need them to work. We need them, if they're gonna be here, they gotta work. You know, get your lazy asses up. You can't smoke weed anymore. Loco weed. It's funny too, because the first laws that were passed in America, well, Jamestown, Virginia, 1619, an ordinance that every farmer had to make 20% of his crop cannabis, but the first law to outlaw it was in California, of all things, that there could be no preparations made of the loco weed. And so with this, they began an epic yellow journalism campaign in which they published in major, well, William Randolph Hearst owned all the major newspapers. So in all the major newspapers, he went around publishing the most outlandish stories, that after smoking marijuana once, a small child, well, a child of the age of 21 would brutally murder his family with an axe. As Henry J. Anslinger told this story over and over again, the child's age kept getting younger and younger. Until, finally, by the time, and this is funny, in Henry J. Anslinger's own accounts, he actually said, I was looking for a way to make this plant illegal, make this substance illegal, but I had to get around the Constitution. And so he exploited an unused clause at the time involving the Migratory Bird Act, where he said, we can get around the Constitution, the legally having to get something made prohibited, the act of prohibition where everybody votes on it. He said, I can get around this if I can convince the international community to endorse the illegalization of the first and most cultivated plant in human history. So he went to the League of Nations and he's like, hey guys, I want you all to make illegal the first and most, he didn't say it like that, but they basically said, yeah, why don't you get out of here? Go smoke whatever you're smoking somewhere else, because you're nuts. And so he heads back to America and says, I'm going to try to pass it anyway. So he calls hearings and goes up to present his evidence. His evidence comprised of newspaper clippings. Newspaper clippings. Nothing else, nothing more. Newspapers. He presented newspapers to the legislators. He presented news articles from the different papers around of entire families being raped and murdered. It was ooga booga, ooga booga, marijuana, marijuana, ooga booga, ooga booga. And everything was going real good until a guy got up there to talk. And who was this guy? Oh, he was the head of the American Medical Association, Dr. James Woodward. And he gets up there and says,